Everybody, Christ is risen. Blessing of the Lord be upon you. I'm Father Seraphim from New Monastery, and we are continuing the Bible study with the blessing of His Grace Bishop Longin. Last time we left off in the book of Numbers at the end of chapter 10. So we continue in chapter 11. We are going to read verses 1 through 17. What we are going to see in the next couple of chapters coming up is the repetitive rebellion of God's people against God. So here will be one of the examples and the Lord's merciful response. Chapter 11. When the people complained, it displeased the Lord. And the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them, and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberach, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again, and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, but now our soul is dried away, there is nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. Interesting how people were slaves in Egypt. They were oppressed to such a point that Egyptians had the right to say whose children get to live and whose children get to die. And ultimately, they ordered these slaves to make bricks without straw, which is something that would be chemically and physically impossible. And yet, here they are in the desert. The Lord gave them food falling right from the sky, and they complain, why can't we have fish and cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic? So, the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof as the color of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it, and ground it in mills, or beat it in a mortar, and baked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was as the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Let's just remember that sometimes when we keep the fast, as the world would say these days, when we are vegan for some time, this kind of a taste, it says here on purpose that the taste of everything that was made out of manna was as the taste of fresh oil. It's a pretty nice taste. But people lusted a lust, and they wanted flesh of some sort. It would have been spiritually better for them to stick with manna and not complain about God, but they lusted for flesh. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. And Moses said unto the Lord, Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them? That thou shouldest say unto me, carrying them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child, unto the land which thou swearest unto their fathers. Whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, Give us flesh that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it is too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. All of this murmuring, complaining, is too much for a man, of course, to bear, no matter how grand of a leader he might be, and he's pleading to the Lord for help. Chapter 11, verse 16. And the Lord said unto Moses, Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone. A little bit of divine delegating. And from verses 1 through 17, we go to verses 30 to 35 to see what happens. And Moses gat himself into the camp, he and the elders of Israel. And there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, around about the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. And the people stood up all that day, and all that night, and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves round about the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattavach, because there they buried the people that lusted. That name means the graves of lust. And the people journeyed from Kibroth Hattavach unto Hazeroth, and abode at Hazeroth. Every time the people murmur against the Lord, that they doubt his providence and his care for them, he strikes them with a plague. It is one time after another, let's say a wake-up call. Now, if we were to face a real plague, what would we be thinking? That it is the end of the world, or perhaps that it is a wake-up call. Book of Numbers, we just finished chapter 11. In chapter 12, to paraphrase briefly, not to read all the verses through, even, if we can say, the chosen ones doubt God's providence and God's care for his people. Aaron and Miriam doubt God and murmur, and they are struck with leprosy. And for some time, they are put into a timeout. To put it simply, outside of the camp, any leper had to be removed from the midst of the camp of God's people. And when leprosy departed them, which in itself is kind of a miracle, then they rejoined the camp and moved again. Chapter 13. If you look at the map of the area where the children of Israel journeyed for 40 years, it is really not geographically that humongous of an expanse. 600,000 men plus women plus children. That's a great number of people to move through a small area, and they would, as we are going to see, come up to the boundary of the promised land, Canaan, then known later as Palestine or Israel, and go back down to the Red Sea in a relatively short period of time. They did not walk endlessly for 40 years. They moved. You can probably find maps online of the movement of the children of Israel through the Sinai Peninsula back and forth. We'll also see very soon why they moved apparently in a circle a few times. In any case, in chapter 13, spies are sent from the camp of Israel to inspect the promised land, the land of Canaan, the land flowing with milk and honey, the land promised to God's people by God Himself. And what they found there was, to most of them, quite disconcerting, because the people they encountered they described as giants, and the cities that they saw in the land were fortified and walled, strong cities, and even the plants that they encountered were something that they hadn't seen before, even in Israel, where they enjoyed leeks and onion and garlic and everything else. So, what they did here is something that you might encounter in imagery, especially if we look at some kind of illustrated Bible, children's Bible, that is these spies carrying a humongous cluster of grapes on a stick over the shoulder, because it wasn't a cluster that weighs a pound or less that one man can pick up. It was something gigantic. So they come back to the camp, and 10 out of 12 spies say that going into the promised land is mission impossible because the people are humongous, they are giants, we cannot defeat them. Their cities are fortified, they have tall, strong walls, we cannot break through. And look, even here, we brought some of the produce from over there, like a cluster of grapes. See how huge everything is? It is indeed the land of milk and honey, but impossible for us to take. Again, these spies are not trusting in the Lord. However, two men that went with the group, Joshua and Caleb, they tell people how it is. If the Lord is with us, of course we can take that land, because the Lord told us we are going to that land. So there is no reason to doubt and to become fearful and to again murmur against God. So we come up to chapter 14, where we are going to read some of the verses. So chapter 14, verses 1 through 3. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night, after hearing the report from the spies. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore had the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? This is going to be referred to very soon, that we should get killed and our wives and children should become prey to those giants. It won't happen. Chapter 14, verses 12 and 13. The Lord says to Moses again, because people murmur, they doubt, provoke, I will smite them with a pestilence and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and mightier than they. Again, the Lord every time reiterates to Moses, we can start over just from you and your offspring, and I'll make you a great nation. And Moses said unto the Lord, Then the Egyptians shall hear it, for thou broughtest up this people in thy might from among them. Again, the same argument. If these people are all wiped out in the desert, the Egyptians and anybody else are going to hear that God's people were abandoned by God and are left for dead in the wilderness. And in doing so, it's not only that people will perish, but the name of God will then be mocked and blasphemed by those who never respected him in the first place. God's people are, let's say, on a mission to prove that the Lord is the only real God. Moses is aware of this. He cannot allow the heathens to mock and blaspheme the name of the Lord. Verses 19 through 24 of chapter 14. Pardon, I beseech thee, says Moses to the Lord, the iniquity of this people according unto the greatness of thy mercy, and as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word. But as truly as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord. Because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoked me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and had followed me fully, him will I bring into the land whereinto he went, and his seed shall possess it. Once again, based on Moses' intercession, the Lord forgives the nation, the whole congregation. And also, let's think for a moment, the Lord here says, if we weren't counting and reading, he was, they have now tempted me 10 times. And the people who did tempt me are going to die in the wilderness and not inherit the promised land. Let's think and remember that Egypt was given 10 chances. Egypt was afflicted 10 times by different manifestations of the Lord's power, if you will, and they would not repent, they would not come to their senses, they refused to recognize the Lord, and they trusted in their own gods. And in the end, their country was left kind of desolate, and their Pharaoh and the whole army perished in the Red Sea. Now these people, to whom God has shown so many miracles in Egypt, 10 plagues, meaning 10 great miracles, and in the wilderness, they already tempted him 10 times, which means he had mercy 10 times already. They still wouldn't quit. So the judgment came upon them. They are going to perish in the desert, die in the desert. Their children will get to the promised land, but they will not, because they kept tempting the Lord. This process is going to take 40 years. This is great food for thought if we think about things on a historic scale. If we think about the fate of the Serbian nation, or some other nation perhaps, and see in how many episodes historically people trusted God, how many times they rebelled against God and turned against Him, and how many years passed before, maybe not even they, but their offspring could dwell in the land of milk and honey. This goes up to this day, most recent history. After chapter 14, in chapter 15, we see more laws of sundry offerings, as the subtitle says here. And then chapter 16 and 17, we should cover them still within the study tonight. Very important point here about the rebellion against Moses and Aaron, and really against God's will. So here we have the leaders of the rebellion. Korach, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men and rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown, and they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said unto them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. A challenge to what the Lord has ordained. And when Moses heard it, he fell upon his face, and he spake unto Korah and unto all his company, saying, Even tomorrow the Lord will show who are his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him. Even him whom he had chosen will he cause to come near unto him. This do. Take censers, Korah and all his company, and put fire therein, and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be, the man whom the Lord doth choose, he shall be holy. Ye take too much upon you, ye sons of Levi. And Moses said unto Korah, Hear, I pray you, ye sons of Levi. Seemeth it but a small thing unto you, that the God of Israel hath separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, to do the service of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to minister unto them. Before anybody thinks that this is a rebellion just of people against Moses and Aaron, this is really the rebellion of Levites, some of them, not all of them, against Moses and Aaron. So, verse 10, And he had brought thee near to him, and all thy brethren, the sons of Levi, with thee, and seek ye the priesthood also. Sons of Aaron were priests, who then sinned, and then others were ordained instead of them. Levites were not priests, but they were workers in the temple. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, which said, We will not come up. It is a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of the land that floweth with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us. Now we're down to straight out lying. Egypt was a land of milk and honey. You can just turn back a few chapters and see that for them, Egypt was really living hell, not the land of milk and honey. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. And Moses was very wroth, and said unto the Lord, Respect not thou their offering. I have not taken one ass from them, neither have I hurt one of them. And Moses said unto Korah, Be thou and all thy company before the Lord, thou and they and Aaron tomorrow, and take every man his censer, and put incense in them, and bring ye before the Lord every man his censer, 250 censers, thou also and Aaron, each of you his censer. And they took every man his censer, and put fire in them, and laid incense thereon, and stood in the door of the tabernacle of the congregation with Moses and Aaron. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the congregation. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. And they fell upon their faces, and said, O God, the God of the spirits and of all flesh, shall one man sin, and wilt thou be wroth with all the congregation? And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the congregation, saying, Get you up from about the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Moses rose up and went unto Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spake unto the congregation, saying, Depart, I pray you, from the tents of these wicked men, and touch nothing of theirs, lest ye be consumed in all their sins. So they get up from the tabernacle of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram on every side, and Dathan and Abiram came out, and stood in the door of their tents, and their wives, and their sons, and their children. And Moses said, Hereby ye shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own mind. If these men die the common death of all men, or if they be visited after the visitation of all men, then the Lord hath not sent me. But if the Lord make a new thing, and the earth open her mouth and swallow them up, with all that appertain unto them, and they go down quick into the pit, then ye shall understand that these men have provoked the Lord. And it came to pass, as he had made an end of speaking all these words, that the ground clave asunder that was under them, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertained unto Korah, and all their goods. They and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. This is also the interesting scene from the movie that I recommended, that happens a little too early in the movie, granted. However, here we have an uprising of people who imagine that everything is good enough and holy enough. They ask Aaron and Moses, why do you make yourselves greater than anybody else? Why do you claim to be holy and something special when everybody is holy? So, this was a delusion. It doesn't mean that everybody that they spoke about, the 250 people and then some along with them, it doesn't mean that they were some kind of hellbound sinners, but Moses was chosen by the Lord to lead the people toward a specific goal. Aaron was appointed by the Lord, remember, after that crazy party they threw by Mount Sinai, where Aaron had prepared a golden calf for people to worship, yet they were forgiven. And Aaron was appointed to be the priest, and then his sons, and then their replacements. And at this point, the Levites, a group of people that came close to the tabernacle, physically and spiritually, rose up, kind of like Judas Iscariot did against the Lord in the New Testament, against our Lord Jesus Christ, and they decided to have a rebellion and, to use our modern terminology, overthrow the power, right? Except here, the distinction was very clear. Moses let God show them who is right and who is wrong. They all took censers. This is again like what happened to the sons of Aaron when they made unacceptable, unworthy sacrifice. These people, whose minds and hearts were definitely not in the right place, they lit up censers and put incense in them to offer incense, but that was not it. It was not only was it not acceptable unto the Lord, it was apparently completely unacceptable and abominable, as the word is many times in the Old Testament. The ground opened up and swallowed them, 250 people. After that, another plague started upon those who sided with the rebels of the uprising. And then the Lord said to Aaron to take his censer of the actual offering of incense and to walk around the camp and stop the plague. This was maybe just in case the 250 people falling into the crack in the surface of the earth and perishing, just in case that wasn't clear enough, there was now a plague that spread among thousands more until Aaron went about and closed the circle, censing with the real censer acceptable to the Lord. And after that, in chapter 17, in order to set things straight, the Lord also called, he said to Moses, to bring representatives of each tribe, one of whom would be Aaron, of course, to show who is the real, the authentic priest of the congregation, the high priest, so to say. And they all took their staffs, their walking staffs, the dry sticks of wood, and they lined them up and they prayed. Moses prayed about it. And the next day, the staff that was in Aaron's possession started blossoming. The green branches grew and the green leaves, and it was blossoming, and it says it bore the fruit of almonds. This way, metaphorically and beautifully, one can see that from that lineage that God appointed comes life. Or rather, through that lineage that God has appointed comes life. The force of life is transmitted further, and the leadership of Moses and the priesthood of Aaron is once again reconfirmed by the good Lord himself, and the people, of course, repent once more, and they carry on with their journey. We have finished Book of Numbers, chapter 17. Next time we shall pick up chapter 18. If you have any questions, like we always say, ask first your parish priest. They would love to discuss those questions. And if that is not possible, then feel free to post the question on the YouTube channel or the Facebook pages where these videos will appear. Blessing of the Lord be with all of you. Christ is risen.